U.S. President Trump has announced he's imposing tariffs on the U.S. three largest trading partners, Canada, Mexico, and China, as soon as Saturday.
How tariffs shape the U.S. economy. Insights from Trump's trade chief. When you hear the word tariff, you might picture politicians in suits, complex economic charts, or perhaps even the heated debates that have surrounded U.S. trade policy in recent years. But what do tariffs really mean for everyday people? And how do they shape the economy on a national and global scale? To get the full picture, we turn to Peter Navarro, President Donald Trump's trade chief, who was at the heart of many of the administration's trade decisions, particularly around tariffs. As the Director of the Office of Trade and Manufacturing Policy, Navarro's influence over U.S. trade policy was profound, and his ideas on tariffs shaped the way America approached international and trade. In this exploration, we'll delve into how tariffs, taxes or duties on imported goods, affect various aspects of the U.S. economy, from manufacturing and jobs to prices and consumer behavior. We'll also dive into Navarro's perspective, examining how his trade policies aim to reshape the U.S. economy in favor of American workers. 1. Understanding tariffs, the basics. Before we dive into the complexities, let's make sure we're all on the same page about what tariffs are and how they work. 1.1. What are tariffs? A tariff is essentially a tax imposed on imported goods or services. The purpose of a tariff is often to make foreign products more expensive in the domestic market, thus encouraging consumers to purchase domestically produced goods. Tariffs can also serve as a tool for governments to protect domestic industries or as a bargaining chip in international trade negotiations. 1.2 Types of tariffs. There are several types of tariffs, but two of the most common are ad valorem tariffs, a percentage of the total value of the imported product. For example, a 10% tariff on a $1,000 car would add $100 to the price. Specific tariffs, a fixed fee based on the quantity of goods. For example, a $5 tariff on every pair of imported shoes, regardless of the price. Tariffs are generally imposed by the government of the importing country, which means that when a tariff is placed on goods coming into the U.S., it directly impacts the cost of those goods for U.S. consumers and businesses. 2. Peter Navarro's philosophy on tariffs and trade. Peter Navarro's tenure as Trump's trade chief was marked by a controversial yet consistent stance on tariffs. Navarro firmly believed that the U.S. had been getting the short end of the stick in trade agreements for decades, and tariffs were the key to rebalancing trade in favor of American businesses. 2.1. A new approach to trade deficits. One of Navarro's core arguments was that the U.S. trade deficit, the difference between what the U.S. imports and what it exports, was a sign of a broken trade system. He argued that the U.S. was importing far more than it was exporting, which he believed hurt American manufacturers and workers. In Navarro's eyes, tariffs were an effective way to combat this imbalance by discouraging imports and encouraging more domestic production. Navarro often framed the issue as one of national security, asserting that over-reliance on foreign goods made the U.S. vulnerable to external economic pressures and geopolitical risks. By imposing tariffs, he argued, the U.S. could promote self-sufficiency and reduce its dependency on other nations. 2.2. The China threat. A major focus of Navarro's trade policy was China. He argued that China's trade practices, including intellectual property theft and currency manipulation, were harming the U.S. economy. Navarro believed that tariffs were the best tool to force China to play fair and address what he considered unfair trade practices. Under his guidance, the U.S. imposed heavy tariffs on Chinese goods, which led to a trade war between the two countries. Navarro's approach was to use tariffs as a form of leverage to negotiate better terms with China. His belief was that by making Chinese products more expensive through tariffs, American companies and workers would benefit from a level playing field. 3. The economic impact of tariffs on the U.S. economy. Now that we understand the philosophy behind tariffs, let's explore how they actually shape the U.S. economy. 3.1 Domestic manufacturing and job creation. One of the key goals of the tariff strategy was to revitalize American manufacturing. By making imported goods more expensive, the hope was that consumers would turn to domestically produced alternatives, thereby increasing demand for American-made products. This, in turn, would lead to job creation in industries like steel, aluminum, and automobiles. Navarro believed that tariffs would incentivize companies to bring manufacturing back to the U.S., where labor costs were often higher, but were offset by tax incentives and government subsidies. In theory, as American factories ramped up production to meet demand, more blue-collar jobs would be created for U.S. workers. 3.2 higher consumer prices. However, while the hope was that tariffs would help domestic industries thrive, there was a downside: higher prices for consumers. When tariffs are imposed on imported goods, businesses often pass on those costs to consumers in the form of higher prices. For example, the tariffs on Chinese goods, which included electronics, clothing, and household items, led to price hikes for everyday consumers. This created a balancing act for the U.S. government. While tariffs were designed to boost local production, they also made it more expensive for Americans to purchase the things they needed. 3.3 strain on global trade relationships. Another consequence of tariffs is the strain they place on international trade relationships. When the U.S. imposed tariffs on foreign goods, other countries often retaliated by imposing their own tariffs on U.S. exports. This led to a trade war that impacted various industries, including agriculture, automotive, and technology. Farmers in particular felt the brunt of the trade war as countries like China imposed tariffs on American agricultural products such as soybeans, pork, and wheat. This forced the U.S. government to provide subsidies to help offset the losses faced by U.S. farmers. 3.4 shifts in supply chains. Tariffs also had a major impact on global supply chains. As companies looked to avoid tariffs on Chinese goods, many shifted their supply chains to other countries like Vietnam, Mexico, and India. This meant that the tariffs didn't necessarily lead to a reduction in global trade, but rather a redirection of trade flows. While this might have been beneficial to other countries, it created uncertainty in U.S. industries that relied on cheap imports from China. 4. The political and global implications of tariffs. Tariffs, while effective as a trade policy tool, also have far-reaching political and global implications. Let's take a look at how the U.S. trade policies under Trump and Navarro shaped not just the domestic economy, but international relations as well. We're 4.1 domestic politics and public perception. While some sectors of the U.S. economy benefited from tariffs, they weren't universally popular. Consumers felt the pain of higher prices, and many businesses were forced to either raise prices or cut jobs in response to the tariffs. This made tariffs a politically sensitive issue, particularly in swing states where voters' opinions on economic policies could be the difference between winning or losing an election. Trump and Navarro's trade policies were met with both support and criticism. Some praised the approach as a necessary measure to bring fairness to global trade, while others argued that it hurt U.S. consumers and strained diplomatic relationships with key allies. 4.2 Global trade relations. On the global stage, the U.S. trade policies under Trump and Navarro marked a shift away from multilateralism. The U.S. pulled out of trade agreements like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, and sought to renegotiate deals like NAFTA, which was replaced by the USMCA. Tariffs were used as a bargaining chip in these negotiations, with the U.S. aiming to secure more favorable terms for American workers and businesses. However, this approach sometimes led to friction with allies like the European Union and Canada, who saw the U.S. as taking a more isolationist stance in global trade. The legacy of tariffs on the U.S. economy. In the end, the legacy of tariffs in the U.S. economy is a mixed one. On the one hand, they succeeded in some of their goals, such as bringing jobs back to certain sectors and providing leverage in trade negotiations. On the other hand, they also led to higher prices for consumers and economic tension with trading partners. Peter Navarro's tenure as Trump's trade chief will likely be remembered for his bold stance on tariffs and his commitment to reshaping the U.S. economy. Whether or not tariffs are the long-term solution to America's trade challenges is still a matter of debate. What is clear, however, is that tariffs will continue to play a significant role in shaping global trade for years to come.